Hi, I'm Brian Carrier from Basis Technology, and this video is part 3 in a 25-minute series about cyber triage. If you're looking for a shorter video, refer to our website. The previous videos cover the installation of cyber triage and how to collect data from a live host. This video now focuses on the analysis of that data. Regardless of how you perform the collection, data immediately starts to get analyzed once it reaches cyber triage. All of the collected executables will be sent to OpsWAT for malware analysis, and other artifacts will be analyzed to determine if it could be associated with an intrusion or malicious behavior. As part of this analysis, cyber triage will mark items as bad or suspicious. Bad items are shown in their own table, and you can find the suspicious items by looking for the yellow numbers on the left. Your job is to review the bad and suspicious items and understand what happened on the system. Any of these items could be used as a starting point in your investigation, and the interface will let you pivot between different data types to understand the situation. Let's take a quick UI tour. The data types that were collected are shown on the left. Selecting any of them will show you the list of items in the table. Suspicious items are on top, and filters can be used to focus on certain subsets of that data. Selecting an item gives you more details on the bottom. The first tab shows you details about the selected item, and other tabs provide more context. The File tab will show you details about any files associated with the selected item, including all of its timestamps, malware analysis results, strings, etc. The Process tab shows you if there is an active process associated with the item and if it has active network connections or open ports. Each tab gives you more information about each item, and you can use this area to help decide if an item is suspicious, and you can use it to further your investigation and get more clues. The top table also has columns to help you get more context about how common or rare an item is. The New column shows you if the item was in a previous collection of the same host, and the Seen Before column will show you how many other computers also had this item. This can help you figure out if the item is common or rare. In this case, I have a fresh database, and this is the first collection, so the numbers are all 0. The timeline in the upper right has an entry for each bad item. You can use this as context during your investigation to remind yourself when bad activity occurred on the system. The tabs on the bottom, Timeline, and Correlation are how cyber triage make you more efficient than using DIY text files. They allow you to much more quickly understand what is going on. Now that we have the basic layout and workflow, let's take a look at this example scenario. We can start in the bad items area and see that we have a file that was found to contain malware, and we have evidence from 2 places that it was executed. The first place is from user assist, and the other is prefetch. First, let's check the file to see what kind of malware it is. From the malware tab, we can see that many engines flagged it as pwdump, which is a password dumping tool. Given that, and that we have evidence that it was run, we should ensure that all users on the system have their passwords reset. We can also take a look at the 8 timestamps on the file to verify that they are all the same basic time to ensure that we do not have time stomping going on. If the standard information times are before the file name timestamps, then cyber triage will alert you to that fact. In this case, they are not different, and therefore we can more easily trust these times if they are not modified. We also notice that this file is in the JDO user account, and that the previous user assist entry also came from the JDO users registry. Therefore, this user has become suspicious. While we're in the process of fully understanding this pwdump program, we can see if it was running at the time of collection, and it was not. With our first piece of flagged malware in hand, we now need to decide where to go next. We can choose to either start pulling on some of the threads associated with pwdump, or we can ignore those and just go through each of the categories with suspicious data. I'm going to choose to do both and head to the second data type, which is users. From there, we'll get an idea about who logged into the system, we'll look at that JDO user account some more, and we'll see what the suspicious entry is that cyber triage has flagged. The Users tab is a useful first stop to get a good idea about what is going on. We can immediately see that the JDO account was flagged as suspicious because it has 6 other different output remote desktop connections. For some users, this is not anomalous, but it is for this user. We can see where he went and see remote hosts with engineering, finance, and HR in the names. Based on the user's outbound RDP activity and the fact that it ran pwdump, we'll mark it as bad. We should also review the list of users while we are here. and we notice that Help Desk 1 is not a typical user for this enterprise, and it has admin privileges, and was created at the same time as the malware. We can see when they logged in and what they did, but we find that there is no login events or evidence of programs being run. Perhaps this user account was created but never used. We'll mark it as bad. We need to decide again where to go next. I'm going to go down the next item on the list, Remote Desktop, because it has suspicious items and because we just saw suspicious remote login events. You'll notice that the first items on the left-hand list are all about user activity, and the second part are all about malware, so it is common to go down the list in this order. The Remote Logins panel shows you the unique combinations of remote hosts and local users. You can use it to look for anomalous sources of remote logins. The suspicious entries in this data are because they are outbound connections that started as JDO and ended up as a different user. We already know that the JDO user was compromised, and we already saw this data from the users panel. We'll mark them as bad though, so that they no longer show up as suspicious. We can make a quick pass through this data to look for recent inbound remote logins or logins that are from the same time as malware. We don't see any. The next data type down is for network shares. These are all of the UNC paths that were found in various registry keys and event logs. The idea here is to look for network shares that were inappropriately accessed. Cyber Triage will not flag any of these as suspicious because it does not know enough about how the company organizes its shares and what the computer user should be accessing. With this data, we see that a startup program got flagged because it was from a remote drive, but that is normal in this environment, and we will mark it as good. We could also add it to our whitelist so we don't see it again in the future. As we go down though, we see that the $C share for DC1, which is a domain controller, was mounted. This is suspicious, and we mark it as such. We notice that this was from the JDO user account. We next move on to see what programs were run on the system. The program run table pulls in data from MUI cache, run MRU, user assist, prefetch, and more. Cyber Triage will call out the programs that were run from places that malware also runs from, such as app data and program data. Both these locations are supposed to have only data in them, not programs. But there are several common programs that run out of these locations, and they can be a source of false positives. You should review each of these entries to look for items that are marked as suspicious or that look anomalous. We can see in this data that many of the suspicious items are false positives, such as GoToMeeting and WebEx. So we should mark them as okay and add them to our whitelist so we don't see them again the next time we analyze a similar computer. We can see some items though in the temp1 folder, which is where pwdump was previously found. We see cleanup.exe, and it is suspicious because of its location and that it's not signed. We also see that it was not flagged as malware. We can look at the file dates and see that they align with the dates of the password dumping program. Even though the malware engines didn't flag it, we can do our own basic static analysis. The file has strings and a low entropy rate, which implies that it's not packed, though the PE header information is suspicious. We can see that it was not a startup item and not currently running. If we had more time, we can go through the strings to try and figure out what it does or run it through a sandboxing tool. I'm going to mark this as bad though because of location and timestamps, although we don't yet know what it fully does, but we can come back to it. We can also see the dllhosts.exe file in the same folder. It is also not signed by its creator or flagged by malware engines, and it's not packed. We can see though that it's a running process under the JDO user account. We can also notice that Cyber Triage is warning us that the name is similar to dllhost.exe. This is an old data hiding technique to pick a name similar to another Windows process. The start time of this process is right before the password dumping program was run at 5:20. We can also see this program has an active network connection to noip.com. We'll flag this as bad. At this point, we're running out of time for our video, but you're probably starting to get the idea about how to use the software. So let's review the rest of the data types to make sure you understand why you should care about them. The Web Artifacts area contains information about web history and downloads. Review this data for suspicious downloads that could be from a phishing attack. The Startup item area starts the set of data types that are focused on malware. This section contains all the programs and libraries that were loaded when the computer starts. There are dozens of places that Cyber Triage looks for you. This data is important because malware usually needs a place to start and persist. Look here for malware and items in suspicious locations. Scheduled tasks are another way that malware activates itself. The malware periodically wakes up and does bad things. Check here for suspicious programs and locations. The processes area gives you the full process tree so you can see which process started what. Look here for the suspicious items and processes that started at the same time as the incident. The active connections area shows you what network connections were happening during collection. This data is important because you may see a connection to a remote server. Though, if the malware is only periodically reaching out, then you may not catch it during the collection. Look here for suspicious processes that have outbound connections to suspicious hosts. The listening ports area shows you what processes had an open network port and were waiting for connection. You care about this data because the attacker could have installed a backdoor software and a new network port is listening. Review this data for unexpected processes that are listening. Dns Cache will show you which host names that the host recently tried to resolve. You can look here for host names that could have been used by the malware when it reached out to a remote server. This is where you can see data even if the connection was not active during collection. This data is hard to analyze, though, without the use of IP reputation databases. The Registry Area section will show you suspicious registry entries. It will not show you all the entries. The suspicious ones are ones that are very large or have suspicious characters in them. The Files area shows you all the files that were collected because they were a startup item, run by the user, packed, etc. Finally, the System Configuration area shows you basic settings, like what audit levels were enabled. You should use this data to determine if security settings were disabled or see what you should expect for audit logs. After you've gone through your data types and marked some as bad, suspicious, or good, you can make your final report. You do this from the dashboard. The report provides a list of the items that were marked as bad or suspicious, and you can toggle between a general view and a more detailed view. This concludes the Cyber Triage demo video. We covered how to install it, collect data with it, and analyze the data. If you have further questions, please send us an email at support@cybertriage.com. Thanks.